Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Maria Espona with ArgIQ, and we are partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT CDO, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers for a series of interviews. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Rayid Ghani from the Carnegie Mellon Institute. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you. Thanks.
Governments sit on one of the most precious assets, that is the data. So what do executives want to see as it relates to enterprise data management in the public sector? What do you think about this?
It's an interesting area, right? Because if you sort of look back over the last 20 years in the private sector, 20 years ago, people, when I was finishing grad school and kind of going and starting to work in the corporate world, people were sort of starting to build these massive data warehouses, and they would spend 5 years building a data warehouse. And then by the time it was built, it would have to be redone. And they start a new 5-year plan. And so nobody ever used it for anything. They were just constantly building it. And I think governments have kind of in some ways the same situation, that a lot of the organizations have been sort of trying to focus on collecting data, but without knowing why. And I think the hope is that if we collect enough data, we can do something with it. And I think I think we kind of, and often, the program teams, the policy teams are not in that process, right? So the policy teams are kind of in government, the public sector are doing their job, they're providing services. And then there's the IT and the data team that are sort of collecting and organizing data. And they don't know the use cases, and the policy team doesn't know what data is there. So they're kind of doing things separately. And I think that makes it difficult to have a strategy that says, no, we need to design our data management and analytics plan to solve these problems. And those people on the data side need to understand what it's going to be used for, because most of the data is being collected by the people in the field, right? They deliver a service, and they collect data as part of that, and then it gets stored somewhere, but then it rarely is given back to them to provide better services, because that's the main purpose of this data, is to improve service delivery. All of the data that we're collecting in government, is the main purpose is not to store it or analyze it, it's to improve the service delivery. And a lot of it doesn't get used for that, which means that the people collecting the data have no incentive to collect better data, because it doesn't help them. Nonprofits also, the main reason most nonprofits, if you talk to them, collect data is because their funder wants a report. So their data was collected typically to justify funding decisions, not to provide better services. So the people who collect it are not motivated, and nobody's using it. And I think that's what needs to change, is that, instead of thinking about it as we need to collect data, we need to provide better services. And one really good way to do that is to collect data to figure out how to improve and do better service delivery and better measurement. So I think another thing sometimes a lot of these organizations do is use data to also evaluate what they did. And that's useful. But it's only useful if you then improve what you do, right? If the goal is just to evaluate, then who cares?
Absolutely. It's like to use for your decision-making process to have an input, but you have to have the right data, and you have to tell, as you said, someone to collect the right data in the right format. If not, it's something that is storage there, just waiting. It's a waste of time and energy, and the worst thing is that the system is just not working properly, because all the data that would help to improve the services that they are providing or whatever they are doing, it's laying there.
Right, exactly. And I think that's sort of, the siloing of here's the data people and here the program people means that it's not being collected for a specific purpose, but at the same time, it's not generic, it could be used for anything, is nice in theory, but in practice, it becomes very hard to kind of have this general purpose thing. You kind of have to build it for a few different use cases in the beginning and then generalize rather than like, well, let's just collect stuff and then we'll see what happens. And that's, that's rare that, people can do that really well.
Oh, yeah, I had another question that it's related to this, that is technology for technology's sake is expensive and ineffective, but governments are being sold technology solutions all the time. So how do they ensure those solutions are the right fit for the problem at hand? That's the challenge. Right,
exactly. And that's, I think that's sort of, right now, if you had resources, you could hire people in a lot of different areas, right? But I think right now, a lot of people in the public sector are kind of looking for people who can do a lot of different things. Like they might not have a resource to have a team of 20 people. They want a team of 3 people who have kind of a little bit of interdisciplinary skill set, who understand policy, who understand data, who understand sort of machine learning, social science, and statistics, and kind of figure out what's the right tool to use for a specific problem. And I think that's, both Carnegie Mellon, but also other universities like Chicago, Georgetown, a lot of other universities have started creating these programs. CMU has had them for many years before I was here, that bring in sort of train students in these different disciplines, right? That train statistics, trained in machine learning, there's trained in sort of how to use databases, they're trained in social sciences and finding causal inference, because it's not just about one discipline in one field. So I think that's kind of in my mind, though, giving that training and then exposing people to real problems where they get an opportunity to see how do you combine these toolkits, because those are the people who want to create it and then send them out into the public sector to do this type of work, because where else would they come from if we're not creating them?
Yeah, thank you for your answer. I totally agree with you. And then you mentioned something, but to structure better the concept, data management and utilization program can only be relevant for an organization if it's aligned to the strategy. So how do we make sure that we are integrating technology into a broader strategy and then measure its effectiveness, and how hard it's to do? Because we mentioned something already, that you have the management in the public sector plus the IT people, and that there is no link. So how do you see this alignment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough, I think there are different models, and I think companies, private sector, have the same struggle, right? So some companies decided they want to have this central analytics and data team that's sitting in the middle and it's supporting each department. And some decided, no, we're going to embed a couple of people in each department. And they both had their challenges. And the central team is large, and I think governments kind of have the same sort of challenge right now, is do we make a centralized team that's separate from the policy teams? Because that means you can have more people in one place, they have each other to talk to, but they don't understand the needs of the policy teams. If you embed them, then you have this one person by themselves in that team who understands the policy problem because they're embedded, but don't have enough. They're the one person that is doing everything related to data. They're collecting, they're storing, they're managing, they're also trying to do analysis, they're trying to build a system, and that's too much. So I think it's the question, the challenge is, you want people to have a group around them that can provide them support and kind of training and feedback, because that's what a lot of people coming into these fields, and they need a team, but they also need the policy context and have an understanding of what is the problem they're solving, what's happening on the ground in the field. So like, for example, when we do training programs here at ArgIQ, we're doing a lot of teams right now are actually out. The student teams are out visiting the project partners in different cities that we're working with to meet with the different people to go, if they're working, on mental health services, to go in with the mental health responders on actual ride-alongs, or with ambulances, or take, one of the projects is with National Suicide Helpline. They're at the call center, talking to the people who are taking the mental health professionals, taking the phone calls, or going up. So I think you kind of need to embed them in the process, get them an understanding of where did this data come from? Was this data being collected, on paper, and sometimes it's raining outside when people are doing this? What happens when, how does data entry get messed up when that's happening? Do people sort of skip collecting data because it's they're trying to deliver a service? When somebody does something, how does real world embed, appear in this data? Because you only see data. So and I think there's no way to teach them other than have them see that process. Yeah. And again, that the same thing for when they are out with the professionals who are working in these organizations. They need to kind of be part of the entire process to get an understanding. But they also at the same time need their peers, or they need to have enough people like themselves that provide them with the learning to kind of need to grow on the technical side as well. But if they're the only one in that team who has the data skills, then they're not getting that feedback to grow and learn. So I think that's the tension, is ideally the embedding is happening, but also there are enough people embedded that they can bounce ideas off each other, they can have a feedback process, that they can both grow technically, but also grow understanding of the policy problem, the policy context.
Yeah, I think that what you just mentioned is the reason why data literacy is growing so fast in the last few years, because we need the management and the different stakeholders to understand the importance of the data in their process, in their decision-making process, in their daily life, and also the process to generate the data, because it's not the same one data that you collect from a system that one that you collect because of a phone call. They have different characteristics.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think you absolutely need them to be embedded.
So thank you so much, Rayid, for this interview. I really enjoyed. I learned even a lot. So thank you very much.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.